Are you chasing arbitrary strength standards, constantly comparing yourself to what others can lift? Maybe you're frustrated that your squat still isn't at body weight or your bench press hasn't hit 2 plates yet. Here's what most lifters miss: that true strength development works just like a control system. It's not about hitting random numbers, it's about creating the right feedback loop for continuous progress. Today, we're talking about why progressive overload is the only strength standard you'll ever need, and how understanding control systems will transform your training forever. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we're talking about the most important principle in strength training, the one from which all others derive: progressive overload, or what some people like to call progressive loading, because technically you're not overloading, but that's a different topic. And we're going to look at this through the lens of engineering control systems. I'm surprised I have never talked about control systems before, but here we are. Control system is a feedback mechanism that helps something improve or maintain stability, like, for example, the speed on your cruise control in your car, right? Or another one I like to talk about is your thermostat. You keeping your house at the perfect temperature. It's always feeding back based on what the actual temperature is. And your body has a similar system for adapting to training. And if you can understand that and tie it to this concept, it is kind of going to revolutionize how you think to getting stronger. Now, before we get into this episode, if you want to experience a program that applies this and all of our other principles for nutrition, training, mindset with scientific precision. I'm just kidding. Not that scientific. There's a little bit of flex in there. I want you to consider joining Wits and Weights Physique University. We now have, as of the end of February, going into March, we're going to have our first monthly challenge. Every single month, we're going to have a challenge in the group, in addition to the custom nutrition plans, workouts, tracking tools, courses, the supportive community, check-ins, all of that to help you reach your strength and physique goals faster than ever. So if you want to try it free for 14 days and get your first challenge at absolutely no cost, use the special link in my show notes. That is the only way to get it. You have to click the link in the show notes to join for free for the first 14 days, Wits and Weights Physique University, and get to try the first challenge at no cost. And I will be unveiling what that challenge is soon, but you can join at no cost. Reach out to me if you have questions. And now I want to get into today's topic, which is progressive overload. And we're going to cover it from a different perspective. First, we're going to talk about control systems, because control systems are a really good analogy to our bodies in the context of strength training. Then we'll talk about the 3 components that regulate your training adaptation, and then how to apply this framework to your own training so you can get some consistent progress. Now, I've talked about progressive overload before. I usually approach it in the more traditional sense, talking about increasing your weight and your reps and all of that. But today is going to be a different angle that I think you're going to appreciate. So let's talk about control systems. These are actually everywhere in engineering. They're everywhere in your life. You don't even realize they're there. They monitor outputs, they compare them to a desired target, and then they make adjustments. And anything run by a computer today pretty much has a control system. And that's how things can run optimally and automatically. So I mentioned the cruise control in the intro. Your car's cruise control, very common system that we're all familiar with. It is measuring your speed on the road. It compares it to your target speed, and then it adjusts the throttle. Now, of course, if you're driving a Tesla or something that has automatic driving, that is a much more advanced control system that's using sensors and cameras and everything to keep you on the road. But just back to the cruise control, if you go uphill, it's just going to add more gas. If you go downhill, it eases off, and it does it in a very smooth way. Well, generally it does. It's not jerky. It's not like over responsive. The system's always working to maintain that perfect speed. Well, your body works the same way when it comes to building strength. When you lift weights, you create a stimulus. Your body then responds by adapting. It builds stronger muscles and more efficient neural pathways, right? It's both neuromuscular as well as physical muscular. But here's where most lifters go wrong. They focus on arbitrary numbers instead of trying to optimize the feedback loop so that they can keep making progress. Whether you want to call it ego lifting or just a lack of understanding, very common problem I see. if I give you a concrete example, all right, let's say you're squatting 225 pounds and then you try to jump straight to 275 pounds. What usually happens? Your system gets overloaded. Your form breaks down, your reps get sloppy, you risk injury. And it doesn't even have to be that big of a jump. You may take a 10-pound jump and it's too big. It's one of the most common reasons people fail their reps. Then they say, hey, Philip, this isn't working. Should I do a reset or take a deload? I'm like, no, you just jumped too much. And you would have known not to do that if you had taken your history and your data into account. But we'll get back to that. So if you jump more than you can handle, that'd be like, again, in the car analogy, you're slamming the accelerator instead of letting the cruise control make the smooth adjustments. And remember, when you do that, your car can't quite get there. And then it may eventually get there, but it's basically doing it in a very jerky way that taxes the engine. Your body, like a good control system, needs time to process the feedback and then adapt. I mean, same idea. Now, progressive overload, which is the gradual increase in training demands, that's all that is. Right? It's not that your body is on its own just deciding to get stronger. It is that you are pushing it to its limit and it's getting stronger. And it works just like any other well-tuned control system. You provide a stimulus, you measure the response, and you make calculated adjustments. And too many lifters get caught up chasing numbers. I need to squat 315, or my buddy squats 315. I'm only squatting 275, so I'm weak. But yeah, maybe for you, you're not. I should be benching twice my body weight, whatever. These strength standards. And I've been asked many times before, like, what is considered strong? Well, it's all relative to you. Some people are super strong right out of the gate. Some people are not. Some people actually get stronger faster than other people. And so if we use arbitrary standards, they are going to ignore how your unique system responds. Think again about homeostasis, your body's natural tendency to maintain balance. When you train, you are disrupting that balance, and then your body is going to adapt to handle future disruptions better. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it is you are shifting your homeostasis, your capacity, your peak. You're shifting it outward, you're shifting it upward, and it's this beautiful feedback loop that allows you to become a different person physically, but only if you respect how the system works and lean into it properly. So that gets me to something it's going to sound a little bit technical. It's something we use in control systems, and it's called a PID controller. I'm going to use this as an analogy for the three components of training control, I'll go back and forth so you know what I'm talking about, so don't get lost in the terminology. It's a PID controller, proportional, integral, derivative. Again, you don't have to know exactly what those mean, and I'm going to give you a very kind of simplified definition of those. So it might sound complex, but your body's response to training follows the same pattern. Let's just break it down. First, the P. So remember, PID, proportional integral derivative. The P is proportional control. This is your body's immediate response to a training stimulus, like right in the moment. When you lift a weight that's challenging, but manageable, meaning you can actually do it, and that includes for all the reps. So that means if you're doing a set of 5, that means you lift a weight that you can get for a set of 5, and it's not like a max all-out grindy set. Your body then responds proportional. It recruits the right amount of muscle fibers. It helps you maintain proper form, right? Balance, stability, all that. And it helps you complete the movement successfully. A lot of this is neuromuscular. A lot of this is based on movement patterns. This is why having enough reps and enough practice and frequency is important. But the point is your body will proportionally respond. If you, however, try to go too heavy, too fast, the system gets unstable. You're going to fail your reps, or your form's going to break down. That could be the potential for injury. Your nervous system also gets overwhelmed, especially on really big lifts like deadlifts. But if you increase it just the right amount, right, just that 5 pounds on your bench press, or maybe it's 2 pounds with microplates, depends on where you are, your body's going to adapt perfectly. There's a nice sweet spot. It's not super wide, but it's also not so precise you have to be down to a decimal point or anything like that. And again, I've seen this countless times with clients. Those who try to force huge jumps in weight inevitably are going to plateau. I don't even call it a plateau. It's like they feel like the program's wrong for them, or it's not the right weight, or not the right lift, or whatever. And they immediately go to the doom and gloom, all these potential issues. And granted, if you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating enough, those could definitely be the issues. But sometimes it's just you're not increasing by the right amount, or you're not taking enough rest period, and you're just over. It's not only progressive overload, it's progressive way overload. Okay. But if you respect this proportional ability for your body to meet the demand only up to its limits, right, and getting into that sweet spot with those small calculated increases, now you could build strength consistently for years on end. I mean, years and years. So that's proportional control. Then we have integral control. Remember, PID, proportional integral derivative. So integral control, this is really looking at history. It's looking at the accumulated training over time, not like your injury history or your training or diet history over the years. This is more the recent, like the last few days or last few weeks of training. And this is also why tracking your volume and your progression and what you're lifting and how much you're lifting really matters a lot, okay? Your body just, it doesn't just respond to what you're doing today. It kind of remembers the workload that you've handled over the past few days, weeks, even months. And so if you brought me someone and said, hey, write a program for them, I wouldn't know what is optimal for them unless I talk to them about what they've done recently, right? Or I would have to get them into a kind of easy kind of prep phase for a few weeks just to work all the fatigue out of their system. Actually, there's a good analogy when we talk about dieting and prepping for fat loss, kind of getting the food-related calorie deficit stress out of your system, similar idea. So your body kind of remembers this, kind of like, it's like your bank account. I mean, if you put $1,000 in the bank today, that's great. But if you've spent so much money the last 6 months that you're in $1 million of debt, that $1,000 isn't going to do much. So I don't know how great of an analogy that was, but it came to mind. And back to training. This is where a lot of programs themselves, like in isolation, actually fall short because it's all about this individual workout, right? Hey, come buy my latest workout. Like I have a workout for you, or follow this workout on YouTube. And it just says, just jump right in. It's not personalized. It doesn't count for history. If you're going to buy a program from somebody, take my coach, Andy Baker, for example. He sells templates on his website. But when you download one of those templates, it's this like 20-page PDF explaining the principles behind it. And there's actually a lot of work you have to do to make it work for you. And this is not a criticism on Andy. He wouldn't mind me saying this. It's because he doesn't know where you started from, and you need to figure that out as you get into the program. He's not just going to say, hey, do these exercises these days and you're done. Anybody can do that with ChatGPT today. That's going to fall short. The bigger picture is, are you gradually increasing your volume, or have you gone with too much volume recently? Are you balancing intensity and volume over different exercises, days and weeks, right? Because your body knows this, even if your mind doesn't realize it. And that's why you need, I guess I'm going to get to the third piece now when I talk about deloads, but that's why you have to be aware of your history when you program. So the last part is derivative controls. Remember, PID, proportional integral derivative. Derivative control is the rate of change. So that's how quickly you're progressing or accumulating fatigue, right? And this is why we need either deloads, or we need a program that naturally incorporates resets or variety or undulation or waves or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be complicated. Some are more complicated than others. Some sort of cycling that is in there where you don't even need a deload necessarily, right? Some programs, you just design it that way, and then 6 weeks, and then you have a deload. Others, it's kind of built in. Like I'm following a program that's based on a base strength and then peak strength, and every third week you reset slightly, but the reset is heavier than 3 weeks before that. So it's kind of a natural deload. Your body has limits on how fast it can adapt. So if you're pushing too hard too fast and the system starts to get too fatigued, you start breaking down, that's where you're going to hit a wall, and you're going to keep hitting a wall until you somehow release all that tension and go at the right rate of change. So both the history of it, how much have you accumulated, and then also now what we're talking about is the rate of change, how fast and how hard you're going as you work through this are really important. It's like balancing all of this out is critical. So now, how do we use this knowledge to build your real world strength, to become as strong as possible, to keep doing it without injury, to keep going and being consistent? The first thing is to forget arbitrary strength standards. Don't worry about it. Stop asking about it. Stop worrying about absolute numbers, and instead create a system that respects how your body actually adapts to training. And you may respond differently than someone else to a certain amount of volume. You may respond differently when you're in fat loss versus when you're not, or when you're eating certain foods versus not, when you're training fasted or not, how much cardio or sports or other things you're doing outside of the lifting sessions. So going back to our 3 components, if we want to apply these to real life, let's start with proportional control. This means you're going to make small, consistent increases in either load, that's the weight on the bar, or reps. So if you're bench pressing 185 for 3 sets of 5, you may not want to jump to 215 next week or next session, whatever program you're following. You may want to go from 185 to 190. And if you've been doing that for a while and it's getting really, really hard, you might want to go from 190 to 192.5. This is where micro plates are helpful. And a lot of people somehow don't even realize they exist. I shouldn't say it that way. That sounds patronizing. I should not have said that. But what I mean is a lot of people, you could sense some of my frustration here and how many times this comes up. For those of my clients listening who have benefited from me sharing microplates who didn't know this before, I apologize if that comes across as insulting. But I guess I'm just saying I'm surprised that it's not part of the common lexicon like so many other things. So look for microplates, which include both small fractional plates for your barbell, but also plates that can go on dumbbells. And then that way you can progress in the right levels. And then as you get closer and closer to your limit until you reduce the frequency. In other words, if you're squatting 3 days a week, you can only go up so much doing that before you have to now increase once a week, right? Even if you're squatting 3 times a week, you may only go up once a week, for example, right? So it's got to depend on what level of training you're at. So that's proportional controls, those small, consistent increases. If you're a beginner, I definitely love focusing on increasing load. And then as you become more advanced, you can learn how to increase on reps as well, or back and forth load reps, depending on what you're working on. All right, for integral control, remember this is the one based on accumulated fatigue, you're going to want to track 3 metrics. The first one is your volume per exercise. This is sets times reps. It could be times weight as well, so that's called tonnage. But even sets times reps, just the volume per exercise, okay? And then number 2 is the volume per muscle group, because that way you can see how many sets you're doing per muscle group, which will also tell you maybe you're not doing enough, depending on what your goals are. And then your overall training load across your, what some people call mesocycle or a block, like a 4 to 6 week block, what's your overall load. And there's some cool apps that do this as well. If you're into that, like I use Boost Camp. You could find a link to that below in the show notes. But with Boost Camp, you could actually see a graph of your volume over time. So the program I'm following, you'll see it go up for 3 weeks and then drop and then go up for 3 weeks and drop. So that can be really helpful for those who are trying to make sure that you're in the sweet spot. Now, if you're following if you have a personal trainer or you're following a really good coach or using one of the programs like that are already in Boost Camp, for example, they're probably already set up to give you a reasonable volume. But you need to know, hey, I'm feeling really fatigued. Do I have too much volume? Well, you don't know that unless you track it. And a lot of people don't track this stuff. I'll tell you, even in my lifting community, with all the buddies that lift that I know, a lot of them don't really think about volume. A lot of them are following lower volume programs anyway. You may not have enough volume, though, for what you're trying to achieve. Or you may have too much. And it depends on what phase you're in, too. If you're in fat loss, you may have to drop the volume, for example. So tracking, that's the only way you're going to know, right? That you're progressively overloading without overwhelming your system. And then the last piece, the derivative control, this is more, how do you know do you need recovery or deload? Unless you've already built it in, which I talked about earlier, which is a really smart strategy. Just build it in and be proactive. But I want you to be tracking your biofeedback. How's your sleep quality? How is your recovery? I mean, are your warm-up sets feeling smooth? Are you feeling kind of wiped out right from the beginning? Is your overall performance trending up or down? How is your motivation? How is your energy, right? All of that is important. And again, it may indicate a problem with your diet, with your carbs, with your meal timing, something else like with your sleep, with your stress. But as long as you have the information, you can then start digging into the why behind them. And these indicators are great because they tell you whether you're adapting optimally or you need to adjust something. Of course, you can use Oura rings, you can use your Apple Watch, and those all have different measures of stress and resilience. It's all good stuff. Just make sure you're correlating it with what you're doing. So the key to all of this, to progressive overload, and notice I'm just talking principles here. This one principle is going to translate to everything else. It is even more important than, for example, mechanical tension. right? We talk about mechanical tension being the driver of hypertrophy and muscle mass, but I've never seen a really good lifter not also progress by virtue of using mechanical tension. Thus, it's sort of a secondary principle, if you will. As long as you're progressing, that tells you you're doing the right things. Now, you may have to uncover what things you need to do right to get to proper progressive overload. That's a whole different deep dive. So this sustainable feedback loop is pretty cool once you've implemented it. It makes you a lifter. It makes you confident. It helps you get progress. So I have a client who made progress on a beginning style 3x5 style program, kind of like starting strength with some modifications, right? And she made progress for a while. And then she started to move into an intermediate program and started to stall a little bit and get frustrated. And I asked her, are you progressing on all of your accessory movements? She's like, yeah, all of that's coming straight up. I said, okay, then there's something going on with the main lifts in one of these three areas we're talking about here that we're off on. We're either not increasing the right levels, right? We have too much fatigue. I don't think that's the issue in this case, but could always be that. I think it's more the proportional control. We're not necessarily going up in the right levels. Something's off in the way we're progressing if she's able to progress all this other stuff. It could be a form issue or something as well. All right, so what do you do here for this system? Just to recap, you're going to monitor performance through consistent tracking, so you have the data to act on. You're going to make small strategic adjustments based on your data. You're going to have adequate recovery between training sessions, between sets, and across your whole block of training. And you're going to repeat this while gradually increasing demands over time as your capacity increases. And then when all of this works well, you're going to notice consistent strength gains without plateaus. They're going to be very infrequent and usually for other reasons, or usually because you've overreached just a little bit. You're going to have better recovery between sessions. You're probably going to have fewer aches and pains, lower likelihood of injury, and more predictable progress. Like you can forecast, okay, 6 months, I want my deadlift to be here, and I know I have a pretty good confidence I can get there now that I've gotten a predictable process in place. And that's how you build lasting strength without burnout or injury. Right? It's not as exciting as chasing big numbers every session, but it's far more effective and efficient in the long run. That's what we're all about, right? What's fascinating about all this is once you understand this, your body is a control system. It has these feedback loops. You realize that progressive overload really isn't about just adding weight to the bar, right? It's actually about optimizing your body's adaptation mechanisms. Your adaptation mechanisms. Weight on the bar is just a method to get there. Right? And then that framework can apply to any fitness goal from fat loss to muscle gain. They're all adaptations. So then you're not just building strength, you're becoming, guess what? An engineer of your own physique. That is what we do on this show. That is the point. When you stop chasing arbitrary numbers and of any of this stuff, and you start treating training, nutrition, mental growth, all of it, relationships, like the sophisticated control system it is, your body when it comes to training, everything changes. Your progress becomes more consistent, more predictable, and ultimately more sustainable. All right, and again, if you want to apply these principles to your training, join us in Wits and Weights Physique University. I'm going to give you a secret link in the show notes, and I didn't mention it earlier, but in addition to the 14-day free trial, in addition to a free challenge, you are going to get a discounted rate from what is publicly available. It is a rate that I am testing with new clients. Keep it a secret. Well, I know the millions of people listening to the show won't, but hardy har. Okay. Anyway, back in the Physique University, we use this approach, this kind of very logical, objective, efficient, confident building approach to help you build strength and muscle and also tackle your nutrition. Nutrition is a huge part of it to make this sustainable, to stay injury-free, to get the confidence and the wins constantly. So click the link in my show notes for the 14-day free trial, the free challenge, the secret discounted price. And remember, smart training beats random progress chasing every time, every single time. All right, until next time, keep using your wits, lifting those weights, and remember, your body is the most sophisticated control system you'll ever work with, so learn how to use it. This is Philip Pape. You've been listening to Wits and Weights. I'll talk to you next time.